This is James Ernest from Cheap Ass Games, and you're listening to Legends of Tabletop.
Good evening, everybody. We're on episode number 87 tonight, and we're lucky enough to have James with us. So thank you, sir, for coming on tonight.
Hello.
We do a thing on the front here called Something Cool. So whatever cool thing you may have going on for the last, couple of weeks, last month, it doesn't have to be gaming related, but if so, extra points for that.
Everything I do is gaming related. I can't get away from it. I think the coolest thing I'm working on right now is a game called Rochi, R-O-C-H-I, which is it's a gambling game based on a tarot-style deck from a fantasy book by a friend of mine. Sonia Liris is the author of The Seer, and she's writing the sequel to The Seer, and she wanted a game in it, and I wanted to make her a game, so that's kind of where we're at. The deck is like I said, it's like a tarot deck. It's all character cards. It's all sort of major arcana, 54 cards in 6 suits of different size. So there's four cards in the smallest suit, 14 cards in the largest suit, and the game is, it sort of does the job of poker, but it's very different from poker. And we've been playing it with friends lately, and I just got a beta deck designed, and in another week or two I'll have the beta test rules up for everyone else to download and play. So that's what I've been up to, among many other projects. That's the cool thing I've been doing.
Cool. That sounds pretty good. So we have another project that's coming from a book-related thing you have going on. Also, we have pairs and tack kind of fall into that category.
I love doing games like that. You probably don't know that I also did the Fable 2 pub games, the gambling games that were inside Fable 2. I like writing games of that difficulty level as sort of to nest into larger games or larger worlds. And in fact, the first formal game design project that I ever did was a chess variant or chess style game for a fantasy book that I wrote in high school. And the game got all kinds of development, and the book did not get done. Of course.
But you do have a couple of books under your belt now, right?
Yeah, they're all nonfiction, though. I did a couple of books about how to play poker, and I did a book about juggling, contact juggling. And I am working on, although I'm not really working on it, I should be working on a game design textbook, which is notes from a class that I taught a few years ago, just sort of turned into a full-on book.
Okay, cool. Let me go back, and I'm bringing up all the various windows here for the social media.
Oh, yeah.
So questions up now. We'll cue back into there. So you did a stint over at WotC. Did that time as a freelancer sort of introduce you into the gaming industry, or were you working on things prior to that?
I would say that it did. I went to a convention this weekend that was very close to the hotel for DreamCon, which was 1993, and I looked at the hotel, and I had distinct, pure memories of the first year of Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering. I was at that con reading the alpha rulebook and telling them that I was desperate to help them rewrite it because it was so bad. The first work that I did for Wizards was some editing of their online like comment thread, MTGL, and also rewriting the rulebook. I did that a total of 4 times.
Wow. Okay. That could have been Fantasy Flight for sure, because they're, as much as I like Fantasy Flight games, their books are laid out absolutely horribly.
Well, the rules to a trading card game are extremely hard to write, and you need to be a technical writer and a gamer to be able to do it. They were written by gamers and game developers, and so they sort of they didn't make sense to anybody else.
Concise.
And they weren't really correct either. Like, a lot of the arguments came from the fact that they didn't really meet up in every specific point. So there was a lot of work on everybody's part, but I sort of inserted myself into that and was a freelance writer, editor, graphic designer, and so on for Wizards for off and on, in and out for a couple of years, but never a game designer. Unfortunately, I pitched a game to them, but never actually sold anything. And
was it
eventually went on to start my own company instead.
Right. So when you left there, you started Cheap Ass Games 1996. Is that correct?
That's more or less right. I think I left Wizards in '95. I took about that year, '96, to sort of figure out how to how to do game design as a professional. And because I was writing so many games, I just decided to figure out a cheap way to print them myself.
Mhm. And when you started Cheap Ass Games, what was your, sort of design philosophy getting started?
I wanted people to be able to experiment with different games really cheap. So, and I wanted to do that too. I wanted to bring out a lot of stuff, and sometimes it was deadline driven and not really done when it shipped, and sometimes I was just experimenting with stuff that my group liked but nobody else did. So there's a lot of hits and misses in that first couple of years, but a lot of stuff came out through Cheap Ass, and I learned a lot about how to do it just by doing it.
Right. And the first 10 years of Cheap Ass Games, you put out about 100 games, I think, right?
That's about right. It depends on how you count it, expansions and new games and what have you.
Mm-hmm. And the sort of the cool thing, I guess, was when you got started, it's all black and white, didn't include a lot of the, the fiddly bits, the pawns, the dice, and all those sorts of things to be able to get that price point down. So, like you said, somebody can pick up a game for $5, and if they don't like it, it's only $5.
Yeah, exactly. And we sort of had a philosophy that people would get one good set of gaming stuff, like a good set of dice and a good set of money and a good set of cards and whatever, and just use that again and again. A lot of people sort of liked getting the cheapest components that they could to go along with the cheapness of the rest of the brand. And I was like, well, I guess you can do that, but I don't play Dr. Lucky with paper clips and wads of paper at my house. I play with nice pawns. I don't know why you don't do that. But yeah, our design philosophy was that I looked at the industry and saw a lot of people competing to look bigger than they were and to spend more on production values and more on components. And there was a popular standalone card game that came out the year after Magic that was really expensive. It was like $17 for a deck of cards, which at the time was ridiculous. But it was a double deck, and it was the same number of cards as two Magic decks, so I guess it was okay. There was the same price as two Magic decks, but I just was like, I don't understand. There was a real gulf sort of below $10, and we could walk in there and set up shop and have really no competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good deal. Yeah, and even now, like, I try to purchase most of my games at my local game store. It's easy now online to be able to just buy stuff through Amazon or half.com, and it really sort of cuts out that local element. And you can find some fairly decent games for $20 or less, but they're more filler type games where if you want to get into the the broader strategy, hey, we're going to play this over 2 or 3 hours, you're looking at $50, $60.
Yeah, absolutely. Our games are still cheap on that scale, and I can't do what I used to. I can't do the short run black and white cheap games that I used to make because even printing has changed. It's easier for people to print stuff at home, but it's harder for me to go to a local printer because they don't exist anymore. They've all been sort of sucked up or put out of business because nobody needs to print things. So our free stuff is still free, and we're hoping to put some more stuff up at places like Drive Through Cards. But I can't make a profit on the black and white games unless I charge the same as anybody else would for their stuff in full color.
Right. And it's interesting because you do, prominently displayed on the website are all those free games along with games that you do currently have for sale. What's kind of the mindset behind that to be like, hey, just take the free stuff?
Well, some of them are free versions of things you could buy. They're like demos, or if you can't afford the physical thing, it's quite a hassle to put them together. So I really don't think I'm costing myself any sales there. But I'm also keyed into that philosophy of there's players who just want to play, and I'm okay with essentially giving them a demo of the kind of games that I do, and if they like them, they can go and spend their money on something else. I mean, something else from me.
Okay. Yeah, well, of course.
I mean, I've gotten really lucky with Pack because I don't normally get a chance to market an abstract strategy game, but there's plenty of abstracts up there that are free because I can't sell them. There's some that were free, that were always free, and they were free on my business card and so on. But I've also done some abstracts that just ran in magazines because if I tried to put it in a package and sell it, I would just lose money on it.
Sure. When I was doing my research, for tonight, and I was watching some of the seminars and panels and things that you've done. So let me ask you this: how do you quantify fun?
Well, first you have to define it appropriately, right? And I guess quantify, define. One of my favorite definitions of fun, it comes from a video of goats playing on a big plastic sheet. It's a metal or a plastic sheet that's been bent into an arch, and the little baby goats are jumping up on it and falling off, and it's bouncing around, and they're knocking each other off. And the grown-up goats are like, "You kids, cut it out!" Right? But what the goats are doing is they're poking at a new thing that they've never seen before, and they're seeing what it'll do. They're trying something. They're getting the reaction that they want. Sometimes they're getting surprised. Sometimes that's what fun is. Fun and play are poking at a system to see what it does, and so you have to be able to make guesses about what it's going to do, and sometimes it has to be able to surprise you. And the grown-ups don't get on the thing and play on it because they feel like they've seen everything, and the kids play on it because they feel like they haven't, and they want to learn. And I think that gamers do that with games, and different personalities and different experience levels have different plastic sheets to play on. But some people poke at other people, and that's their fun, and some people poke at pure mathematical systems, and that's their version of fun. But it's all sort of this, it boils down to that same sort of experimentation and learning thing. I think once you get super good at a game, it turns into work. Like, I got really good at blackjack for a while, and it kind of just wasn't fun at all. Like, that's sort of the joke about the long-term blackjack players. He tells you all that he does and his exact edge and the hours that he works and whatever, and you're like, why do you do all this work? And he says, I might get lucky, because the joke is that of course he doesn't think like that. By the time you're that good at something, it just turns into work.
Yeah, there's no luck involved at that point.
Right.
Or very little, I guess. and you're a fairly avid poker player yourself, right?
Yeah, I love poker. I picked poker over blackjack because casinos don't care if you're good at it. So that's part of it. And it's also, if you're really good at poker, you can make a lot better money than if you're really good at blackjack. Blackjack has too many countermeasures, and the stakes are too high and whatever. But yeah, I love poker. I have a regular weekly poker night, and I don't play that for money, but I play it to get together and have fun with people and keep my chops,
Yeah, I mean, that's the epitome of gaming, whether it's D&D or poker or Splendor, as we were talking about before we got on. Just to bring people together and have that ability to just interact, socialize, and kind of let everything kind of fall away for a while.
Well, and when I worked in digital for a few years, I went to work at Microsoft and some smaller studios and did computer games long enough to learn a lot of discipline. But I found out that's not really what I'm good at. I'm good at the tabletop experience. I'm good at the friend experience and the relationship building and the playing outside of the game and all of that. Digital stuff is just somebody else's problem.
Okay. So again, in doing some of my research, I've heard you say that your sort of design philosophy is story first, as opposed to, say, mechanics or a theme. Is it easier to design a mechanic around a story? So kind of what's your process in regards to that?
Well, I want to know what the players are going to do. I want to know what the players are going to pretend to be, what they're going to think about, what they're going to talk about, what's going to attach them to the game. As a publisher, I want to know what I'm going to write on the box. And in the clear exception of games like abstract games like TAC, the story is the most appealing part of the box text. Kill Dr. Lucky is about killing an old man in his house, and how you do that is really secondary to that's what you're doing. If that game was even slightly about something else, it would be less interesting. And to me, that's central to selling it. And I don't just mean collecting money for it, but I mean getting someone to commit their time to learn the rules and sit down and pretend to do that thing with their friends. So because I make primarily games in that category, I prefer to think of the story first. The story is harder than the mechanics. The story is the real challenge. If you don't care about story, then you'll have a game like Splendor where the story is irrelevant. But when I play Splendor, it frustrates me because the story is worse than irrelevant. It tells me lies about how the game works, right? So that's not fun. So so if a story matches the mechanics, I've been through 2 meetings in my life, many times, and one of them is the story is this. What are the mechanics? And the other one is the mechanics are this. What is the story? And the first one is always great. The first one, you can think of 1,000 ways to kill Dr. Lucky. If the story is we're all trying to kill an old man in his house and the first one to kill him wins, how you do that, like the whiteboard immediately fills up with suggestions of individual specific story related things that could happen, ways it could be set up. Obviously it's a board game, but that's not the only way you could do it. We did it as a card game. If I come to you with a mechanic, a dry abstract mechanic, you know, everyone there, your job is to line up 3 things, and if you line up 3 things, they disappear. And then I say, okay, now what's this really about? That meeting goes really badly, right? It has to stay pure abstract, or you put a theme on it that's irrelevant, like candy, or you pull your hair out trying to figure out how to sell it as a story game. It just isn't. You know, there is no thing in the world where you line up 3 of them and they disappear. So right away, you're going against whatever you pretended it is to try and make it into a story game when it wasn't.
Sure.
So that's, you know, that's the foundation of my philosophy. Maybe it's a bad experience. And I know people, other people who design games for a living go mechanics first, but I can't do it.
Okay. I guess Kinesia is like that. All mechanics here. I did a thing. Go do something with it.
Well, and Reiner's the product of and sort of perfect for the machine that delivers his products, which is that his publishers don't care what theme he picks. They're going to change it. And after doing that a few times, I think he's got no reason to even care what theme it is. He tried to sell a game to me years ago, and I went back and forth with him about what it was about, and he just didn't know, but cared enough to not like any of my suggestions. And what I think he was telling me was, just don't tell me, just do it. Just don't tell me what it is. But I couldn't go that way, and it was very abstract. And I was like, you got to give me something to go on here. And finally, it just fell through.
Okay.
But I think most of the publishers that Reiner deals with just take the mechanics and go, okay, Egypt, and ship it. And he's like, okay, whatever. It used to be about the mafia, but go ahead.
Right. As long as the check clears.
Yeah.
So on the heels of that, then, have you ever worked on a game that either you wouldn't play yourself or you just didn't enjoy working on or designing?
I think I've been on big enough projects. I've been a small enough person on a big enough project that I could say, no, I'm not going to go play that game when it ships. But the things that I make for myself, I really enjoy, like, yeah, without exception.
Okay. That's cool. And you have to, I mean, if your heart's not in it, I mean, you know, how good of a quality product is it going to be then?
Sure. And I think that there's sort of a cynical attitude among some content creators that they make product for people who aren't them, you know, a grouchy old man who designs dolls for little girls, and I'm not that guy. Like, if I have to make a game in a sphere that I'm not familiar with, I'll get familiar with that sphere and I'll play that, you know, games of that type with people who like them to try to figure out what's good about them. I don't usually need to do that though, because I like all the kinds of games that I make. I like.
Sure. All right, I'm going to jump over to the live chat. Charles in Charge asks, what was the cheap way of printing in the early days as opposed to now?
Small printers existed. You know, you could have a little neighborhood printer that could run 200 copies of something on his little press and cut it in his basement or whatever. And because people needed things printed, people needed business cards and flyers and quarterly reports and all the things that we now do electronically. 20 years ago, that people had real print shops. So I could source everything locally. I could build it in my house. I could, you know, black and white was cheaper than color because films really were a big part of the cost. But nowadays, pre-press is cheap. Shipping and paper are expensive, and that the shipper doesn't care how many colors of ink you used.
Sure. All right, jump back over here. How difficult is it to balance luck versus strategy and player agency when you're developing?
So very,
Yeah.
but you know, there's a spectrum of games, and people like games all along that spectrum. So TAC is a pure strategy game that is meant to be a good pure strategy game, and I've done plenty of games that are pure luck as well, and everything kind of along the way. The thing that I try to explain in seminars about luck and skill is that luck can be delivered in good and bad ways. If you want to talk about randomness as being either biased or fair, biased randomness is an event in the game that just picks someone to love and someone to hate. And fair randomness is an event in a game that maybe gives different people different resources, but those resources are useful for different strategies. So a simple example is I could either roll a die and advance a mouse, and you roll 6 and I roll a 1, and so you just went farther than me, and that's all we got. Or I could roll a die that gives your mouse cheese and gives my mouse string, and that, okay, those are different things, and it was random, and I didn't know what I was going to get. But if I was prepared for cheese and string, then I'm sort of in a better position than you were to take whatever the dice gave me. There's a mechanic called grit that comes out of Dwarven Dig, but a lot of random games do this, where if they give you a bad roll, they'll also give you something else to make up for it, like a little bit of scratch that you can spend on a re-roll next time or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and it's fair that not every game is for every player, and different games will scratch a different itch, and maybe tonight you want to do in-depth strategy, whatever, but tomorrow it's like, hey, let's play zombie dice, or let's play
right. Exactly. And if zombie dice lasted for 2 hours, it would be horrible. So there's lots of things that mitigate luck, one of them being short play time, that make better and worse games with sort of the same amount of those components.
For me personally, I mean, if I'm going to invest 6 hours, I'd rather role play,
Right.
play D&D or whatever. If we're just going to get together for a half an hour, I could play 30 games of pairs, which is fantastic. Or we can mix in 3 or 4 different games in that same period of time, and then you're getting a little bit of everything.
Right.
All right. As far as mechanics go, is there anything new that we're going to see? I mean, have mechanics been designed out and everybody's just taking little pieces, or do you expect that we'll see, new and exciting things, come out from year to year still?
I think we put way too much faith in game mechanics, and I think that's why you see so many clones of things like Dominion, for instance, or Magic before that. And what people don't understand is, with the possible exception of Dominion, most of the big successful game products, the real bombshells that have hit over the last 30 years, have not been successful because of their mechanics. They've been successful because they represented a new business model. And that's what you should be copying, right? But
yeah.
But in terms of the question of is there anything new, the answer is, of course there is. And back to the theme question, the best way to sort of get at that is to approach games from the perspective of telling different stories. I don't know what story I'm telling in Dominion. I guess I'm building something, but when you get anywhere, if you scratch it any more than that, it just falls apart and it's a math game. So, write a story about competing oil companies. When 2 oil companies drill in the same oil field, if they both withdraw the oil at a very slow rate, they will get the maximum yield. But of course they don't, because if one of them sucks faster, he gets more than the other guy did. Like, that's an amazing mechanic from the real world. And make a game out of that, right? Every game that you invent, if you have a story, there's a system behind that story. There's a reason that it works in the real world. Find out how that system works, and you've got a new game mechanic.
All right, I'm going to jump back over to the live chat. Tom Rogers asks, what are your thoughts on games like Warhammer?
Warhammer what? Warhammer 40K? You mean like or Warhammer the miniatures game?
I'm assuming miniatures game, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I love playing it when I have the time. Like, I got a bunch of minis, and I play with my daughter a few times, and it's a fun game, but it is a huge time commitment. So I don't know how often I'm ever going to play it. I like games that don't cost me much. I have trouble committing to sit down to watch a movie for 90 minutes, and that's passive, right? But
sure.
So I mean, I'm writing games in the 5-minute to 30-minute to maybe 60-minute range these days, and I don't think I'm playing anything longer than that.
Okay. Have you ever played BattleTech or no?
I don't think I have. Okay. I worked on a proposal for a BattleTech style miniatures game a long time ago, but it didn't get very far. But I don't think I played the actual game.
Okay. Yeah, my brother and I usually play Friday nights. That's kind of our thing. He left my D&D group because he was like, I'd rather play BattleTech, and I'm like, if you're going to come over every week, that's great, because I'll get to see you more often.
Well, and when I was working on Pirates of the Spanish Main, I sampled a lot of tabletop miniatures games. So I mean, I played through War Machine, and I played through Warhammer, and I may have played BattleTech in that time, or at least read the books, and a half dozen other ones, just to sort of feel out the space, because I don't typically write minis games. But but yeah, I certainly am not an adherent of any of those.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. Let's see. Where do you draw your inspiration from? We were just talking about, real world examples. Is that, kind of just as you see things as you're kind of going through life and be like, hey, that would be interesting and maybe I can make a game about it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, recently I've been writing a lot of gambling games, and so those are incredibly hard to write properly because you get very few rules. You get like 10 rules or less, go. And the inspiration from those is, how can I take this very simple componentry and deliver a new decision, not a new mechanic, but a new decision to a player, and have him understand that essentially the first time he sees it. But for like a story game, yeah, stories come from everywhere. I keep a notebook. I mean, obviously I keep it on my phone now, but just a long list of, somebody told a joke at a bar. That's hilarious. That should be a game. Every time somebody says there should be a game about that, like, I say that about almost everything, and then when I'm actually right, I write it down and keep it in my list. And I've got an infinity long list of games that I want to write, but it's because I keep them, right? If I was a screenwriter, I would do that thing. If I was a songwriter, I would do that. But I've just got an ear for mechanics and systems and stories that I ought to save and use sometime.
Okay, and that's kind of how Pairs came about then, right? It was one of those things where we're at the pub.
So Pairs was I wanted a game for a specific use. The inspiration for Pairs was somewhat unusual in that I was at a pub with my wife, and we looked over at their shelf of board games, which were in very poor condition, and just said, okay, I want to write a game that goes there. So what is that? What is a pub game? Not just, that belongs on the shelf of discarded board games like, Monopoly and Sorry, but really, what is a game that they would play in a pub? What's the game they'd play in a pub 300 years ago? How would poker work if nobody invented poker? Those sort of questions led to a framework that defined what a pub game is. It's quick, it's portable, it's easy to explain, it happens fast, it's got randomness, you can bet on it, you can make decisions, maybe. All of the things that describe what a pub game is were my footprint or my template for inventing Pairs. And so there was no story per se, obviously, but there was more of a theme or a feeling of like, what is a good quick playing risk management press your luck thing that I can do where the odds are complicated but easy to explain. And that's what led us to the triangular deck. And Paul Peterson and I just kind of sat down with this idea one day, and we said, okay, it's bad to get a pair. And this is based on prior games we've both done. One of the examples being Wizard's Tower from the Fable 2 pub games. In Wizard's Tower, you are dealing cards until two of them match, and they're in a grid, so they have to be touching and matching for it to count against you. But in Pairs, we're just like, okay, somewhere in your hand you have two of a kind. It's like playing low ball. As soon as that happens, you're out. It's more interesting if the odds of pairing one card are different from the odds of pairing another card. And poker sort of delivers that to you by showing you what cards are exposed. But in Pairs, we're just like, well, if we have 1-1 and 2-2s and 3-3s and so on, then the odds of pairing every card are different from the start, and that's interesting. It's just, again, it's easy to explain, but doing the math is incredibly hard, and that's sort of what you have to do on the fly when you play that game.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that wound up in Pat Rothfuss's, or at least. Was it added to, or did you kind of draw it from? I forget what the interaction was there.
Well, Pairs existed kind of in a vacuum, and it was a classic medieval style pub game. Pat was talking to me about other stuff, and I was like, look, man, let's do something together. I have a game that I really like that's a cool pub game. Would you like to put your universe on it? And he was like, sure. So like his books clearly predated the pub game, and my interest in the pub game predated my even thinking about joining it with Pat's books. But we did sort of steer them together for the Kickstarter campaign, and made a few decks that were based in his world. And I think the game may show up in the background of the next book. It may, I don't know, but I'm much more interested in writing the games that he's already talked about, because I love the challenge of doing that. I like the way Pat talks about games in his books, because he's not stupid. He doesn't give away the rules. He just talks about how good they are.
Right.
But even so, like, there's a framework. I know what Corners is. I actually, I know more than just what Corners is, but but and I know what tack is. I know what he says it is, but I want to flesh it out and like make it real. That's super fun.
Cool. All right, I'm going to jump back over to live chat. Tom asks again, what do you think about fan-made games such as Pokemon Tabletop United or GURPS-based games?
I don't.
Okay.
I, I don't even know what the first one is.
Yeah, the first one I hadn't heard of. Tom, I think that if, players sit down and are like, hey, this is a really cool idea. I wish we could play this game. By all means, do it. Find a rule system that works. Have the players that are involved, and everybody's sort of in being able to make that decision. And there's not some question later on. It's like, well, I thought it was going to be this way, but now it's not. So I think that things like that, anything that brings you together, gets you to the table, and gives you that sort of an outlet is fantastic. I mean, the GURPS, you could run practically anything. You can find a book and a rule set within GURPS to run something. So yeah,
Sure.
I have at it.
Well, and fan made. I mean, it's weird to distinguish games as being fan made because honestly, games are just games, and there are so many games that people make up that we don't hear about. We are exposed to the retail game culture, and there's a particular kind of game that succeeds at retail, but people who want to design games sort of think that they have to design for that machine, and that's not true. Like
Right.
everyone kit bashes D&D. Everyone is a game designer. If they're a player at all, they've changed a rule in their life, right? So it's really just a matter of degree from going to kit bashing Monopoly to making up your own games. And yeah, it doesn't have to be something that you can sell. It doesn't have to care about copyrights and trademarks and art and all those things. If you're just making it for your own fun, I think that's how you learn how to do that, right?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. What games are hitting your table these days, if anything?
Stuff I'm working on. Let's see. We played a little bit of, this was still work related. We played a little bit of X-Wing over Christmas.
Oh, cool.
That's quite lovely. We played. My daughter's a big fan of. What's the architecture skyscraper building dice game? What's it called? Blueprints. She's a big fan of Blueprints. We picked up. God, it's the most difficult to remember name, but it's like a Splendor type game from Eduardo Baraf. Do you know that game I'm talking about? It's Gems something something.
Not off the top of my head, no.
I'm gonna look it up now. See.
All right.
But you should ask me another question while I'm doing this.
Okay. Well, I'll just respond to Tom. Yeah, I mean, anything that you're running at home, any sort of a homebrew system, obviously not supported by the company. So I don't know if I'm misinterpreting a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you're not out selling it, I don't see that there's any sort of problem. If you wanted to sell it, and I see that the Pokemon one is free. Even free, you got lawyers and everything else. Could be kind of dicey. But if you're doing it at home with your friends, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there you go. It's called Gem Pack Cards. It really is it's a different version of the Splendor style mechanic that I liked quite a bit better actually.
Okay.
Gem-packed cards from Eduardo. Oh, and he did Herbaceous too. Okay, that's great. I got to see that.
That I have heard of.
Yeah, people were talking about that this weekend. I need to see that. I don't know what it is, but I bet it's awesome.
How long do you play test a game before giving it the axe?
Anything between 40 minutes and 7 years.
Okay.
These kind of general questions are so tough. I mean, it's more fun to tell specific stories, but I literally got a game designed in 45 minutes and produced in 4 hours once. I don't think I'll do better than that. And Diceland took easily 7 years from first concept to delivery because it went through so many permutations and trying this and trying that, and obviously I was doing other stuff at the time, but there is no right answer. I think. Let's talk about what I'm doing right now. For Capital City, which is also called the Train, it's a game that I'm working on for the Calliope's Titan series. They kickstarted that game spring before last, and during the Kickstarter, I did enough work on the game to sort of know what it was going to be. So there was sort of a 1 month like heavy action period where it's like, okay, this is kind of what the train is going to be. Then it was kind of backburnered for about 6 months. I worked on it for about 3. I handed it over to them about 3 months ago, and they had it for that time, and I didn't look at it. And then they brought it back to me with their notes and changes, and now it's kind of in the final month for me to get it back to them by around the 1st of February. So if you stacked all of that up, the time when it was actually in playtest is probably about 6 months from, you know, over the course of 2 years. But that 6 months is time that I'm actively writing for it or changing it. And it's been through like 4 serious revisions in its lifespan. So it's still got sort of the theme of building a Western town and a couple of the unique mechanics that I haven't gotten rid of, like how people connect to buildings, but like how where everything comes from is totally different and has changed many times in that period. And it might still go through some more design development, but they want to get it out by Gen Con, so I think we're on a clock here.
Okay. Is there anything, you know, in a game that doesn't get designed in a couple of hours, is there anything telling in a particular game that kind of allows it to hang on for a while? Is you're like, you know, there's just something that, you know, that you're, you know, kind of just sticks in your brain about, you know, you really want to work with a specific mechanic or, you know, tell a certain type of story. You know, is there anything that just be like, you know, why a game would last for 7 years before having its story fully told?
Well, it just isn't clicking. I mean, like Diceland had all kinds of issues. One of them was a production issue. It originally was a plastic dice game, and when we figured out that we could put make paper dice, we were like, well, we can print on paper dice, and suddenly we can put all kinds of information on this and a picture, and so the level of depth in the game changed quite a bit then. You know, and that's a fundamental change in form factor. With Capital City, I mean, it's an open-ended question. It could be done tomorrow, or it could be done on Capital City is basically done, but a game can be done tomorrow or never, and that's why it's really hard to put an estimate on when it's going to be done, because, you know, it sticks around because it isn't done. It sticks around because it's not working, because there are design objectives. If you can quantify your game objectives, your design objectives, you ought to do that. If you're not hitting them, you should continue trying until you do. You know, but if you don't have them solid, if you don't have them on paper, you can kind of just give up and say, well, this is good enough, let's ship it, and you don't really get the thing that you wanted.
Okay. So this is from Twitter, from Bob Wyman, and this is sort of related to what we're talking about. Is there a phase of game design that you're tempted to linger at, or is it, you know, finish line focused?
I saw that one. I don't know about the linger phase. I don't know what that is. Like, I'll tell you where most of my games sit for the longest is in the workshop phase, which is I will tell the idea to people and see if they like it. And if they don't like it, then I'll workshop the idea a little bit and tell it to more people and see if they like it. But like, I've got a game called Going Under, which is about it's an asymmetric game where one player is playing an undertaker in an old west town, and the other players are playing a big box mortuary service that's coming into town to put him out of business, and in so doing kill the town. And like, it's a really weird story, and I keep workshopping it, trying to make it work, but I did one sort of prototype of this a couple years ago, but it didn't really stick. And so yeah, this game is lingering perhaps forever in the I wish I could make this story work phase.
Is this drawn from the headlines of real life? Is this like the Walmart story coming into?
It's a little bit of a Walmart story, yeah. So and it's asymmetric because the big box chain is played by multiple players, and they are sort of working together in their own little game, and they're competing with each other, but they sort of have this megalithic thing that they can do that the singular player can't do. And I don't know more than that. I mean, I'm not hedging here. Like, I literally haven't written that rest of it, but that's the story that I'm trying to tell, and it may be just too hard to tell it.
Okay. Tom is bucking for an internship here at the podcast. I got a couple of more questions here. So let's see. I got to scroll back up because he's still typing. What are your thoughts on games such as Munchkin and Cards Against Humanity?
Okay, such as. What are my thoughts on Munchkin? I don't know. I played Munchkin once. That's my thoughts on Munchkin.
Okay.
I was like, what's all this about? And it's funny, but not in a way that I think is funny. So I appreciate it, and I'm glad that they can sell lots of it. But I don't play it. And Cards is kind of the same way. Like, I mean, I love Max and I love Cards, I guess, and I kind of enjoy playing it. But I typically don't break it out because Cards sort of gives you an excuse to be bawdy and funny, and my friends don't need that. They're just funny anyway. I think it's difficult to get into arguments about whether Cards is a too close of a ripoff of Apples to Apples. I don't personally think it is, but I can certainly understand both sides of it. I mean, in my former life, I was regularly accused of plagiarism, so I kind of had to walk away from that and do this instead. But it wasn't what I was doing, and it's not what I do now, and I just don't like to get into those arguments.
Sure.
But it's a game system type that's so simple that you can't change much before you fall right off the world, right? So for what it is and what it does, I think it's fine. Now you can, and they've been slicing that pie thinner and thinner. Have you seen Rotten Apples?
I have not, no.
Rotten Apples is a Target product that is obviously at the nexus point between Apples to Apples and Cards Against Humanity. It's in a brown box. It looks just like Apples to Apples. It's basically got the same tagline as Cards Against Humanity, and it's like essentially, as far as I can tell, bought by Target for Target to do that thing that the other two games apparently don't do enough.
Yeah, well, I think with the massive success that Cards Against Humanity have, you have a lot of clones now that are out. I have Munchkin. I picked it up recently. I still have yet to play it. I have Cards. I've played a ton of it. It's kind of situational. Like, I could play that with my brother, my friends and stuff. Not something I would ever take to the board game meetup. I mean, you really kind of have to know your audience, because it's,
Well, I don't know. When I talk about things being funny, I understand how they're funny to somebody else and not to me. Without singling out any particular game we were just talking about, like, I think there are sort of two kinds of humor. There's the humor that is funny because you haven't heard it before, and there's the humor that is funny because you have. And I'm definitely in the sort of former category. I like to be surprised, but I know that there's a lot of people who laugh strictly because I'm referring to something they've seen before, not because what I've said is actually funny. Like, Shrek is built entirely on that kind of joke, and it's not funny to me, and I can't argue that it is funny to somebody else.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's cards when we play Cards Against Humanity that just win because it's that particular card.
Well,
and
what's frustrating about that, and this is from a mechanical perspective, though it's silly to talk about Cards Against Humanity from a mechanical perspective, but what's frustrating about that is that the punchline wins because it is funny, not because it's good for the setup.
Right.
It's frustrating. And I played much harder games like that about writing jokes and so on, and I get why you can't challenge the players too much, but like I would rather that the Cards Against Humanity winner be a synergy of the question and the answer rather than just the answer is funny. But of course that means I would rather that my friends think differently than they do, which I can't really change.
Right. All right. We kind of brushed on Kickstarter a little bit, and you guys are really savvy in that. Top-notch videos. Quality is great. Sometimes we see people in costumes and things.
Thank you.
How steep was the learning curve coming into Kickstarter as a whole new medium for for what it is that you do?
I guess take a look at our first one, and you'll see how much we've learned since then. But it was steep. There's still a lot to know. Kickstarter was fairly new when we get started in it. It's still fairly new. I went to a lot of seminars and tried to understand the common wisdom about Kickstarter, and I think people were just in a lot of cases grasping at thin air, trying to figure out how to maximize their gains on that platform. I was being told that you have to start on a Tuesday and end on a Friday, and have to have backed at least 7 projects yourself, and and you have to get at least 85% funded in the first 17 hours. All these numbers are just completely pulled out of thin air. And what you really have to do is find partners who are famous and get them to talk about your thing. Like, that's so much more valuable than any of the other like number crunching detail garbage. So what I tell people is, when they want to do a Kickstarter, if they want to, if they're not already famous, they should find somebody who is, because crowdfunding starts with crowd and ends with funding. It doesn't just, you don't just put up a project and cross your fingers. And I guess it's hard to see that from the outside, because everyone thinks that they discovered a Kickstarter project on their own, but they didn't, right? Somebody told them about it, and there's some network of intelligence that pointed them to the particular one they're looking at. And if you can build that network, you're going to be successful on that platform. And if you aren't, then you can't.
Sure. I mean, that's half of the interviews that we do, at least half, are all Kickstarter related. I mean, we have designers coming on, and maybe you're coming back on again when the new Kickstarter comes out.
Yeah, of course, I will. I'm actually sort of, I'm missing it because it's been like a year since I ran one now.
Yeah, and it's cool for us. It's cool for me to be a part of that process. I mean, how much help is it that someone comes on our show? Maybe a little bit, maybe not. But to be part of the conversation, to sort of be the wind beneath people's wings, as it were, to kind of help in that whole social media onslaught that accompanies a Kickstarter. It's fun for me, and it's good. It's enjoyable to see people hit those funding goals and see those games get made, because Kickstarter's given gamers a whole new avenue now to be able to experience games that Parker Brothers isn't going to make, or whatever, Milton Bradley. So it's good.
I talked earlier about new platforms and new business models being as important in gaming as new mechanics, or certainly, in my opinion, more so. That's Kickstarter, right? And you can't point to a single game because the platform exists outside of that game, but it certainly revitalized my business. Mm-hmm. It was going to be very difficult for me to break back into hobby gaming after a 5-year hiatus without some kind of jump start. And Kickstarter certainly did that. Like, we did our Unexploded Cow Kickstarter. I'm going to get this wrong, but I think we did it in the fall of 2012. And, without that, we would have been scrambling to try to remember, get retailers to remember that we exist. And with it, we were able to do it with very little risk. So that's been very good for us.
Sure. And it's good for you guys, because, if you have an idea for a game and you're like, I don't know if people are going to like this or not, we've play tested, it seems relatively successful. You bring it to Kickstarter, and it's sort of, that proof in the pudding. Yes, people want to have this. I mean, the Pairs, I think you were looking for like $12,000. It hit over 300. And TAC, I don't know if you're surprised, but 1.3 million. Holy cow, that's amazing.
It's a good number. I mean, our goals for both of those games, our real goals, were certainly higher than our funding goals. But we had a range. Pairs vastly outperformed our expectations, but it was not outside of our range, because Patrick had been involved in a poker deck for the Name of the Wind the previous year that raised even more than that. So Patrick's a big draw, and we know that, and we love working with him. But that's a huge reason that he's good for us, is that he's already got a dedicated fan base, and they know that whatever he associates with is going to be good, and we can rely on that. His stamp of approval is worth, as you said, 1.3 million. I think without a backstory, an abstract game has real trouble getting traction in the market, and that's why I don't typically do them. I think I spent a little extra time, and of course I got a lot more extra feedback on TAC, so it's going to be even better than the ones I've done before. But man, give me a chance. I want to do another one.
Yeah. All right. This is a complete aside. When I was doing my research, and I saw Pat's name, and I'm like, geez, that sounds familiar. And then I pulled up his picture, and I'm like, oh shit, that's Viari. That's how I know Pat. And then it all started to come together. I'm like, oh, this all makes sense now. I thought that was the coolest thing, because I had no idea of the synergy that was happening. So that was pretty cool. So TAC, and I think maybe we touched on this already. It's loosely based on a game that's described in Pat's book, Wise Man's Fear. And I guess you were saying earlier that he describes the games enough and tells how cool they are, but there's a lot of room for you to kind of maneuver then to put stuff together.
Sure, and in fact, I'll disagree with your use of the word loosely. It's tightly based on that game, and actually, like, it wasn't designed straight out of thin air. Like, Pat not only gave me the material in the book, but a couple of pages of more notes about what he wanted the game to be about. He wanted road building to be a part of the story. He wanted pieces that were simple but could combine and make more complicated and powerful pieces. And we sort of, what that became was the stack. Like, a stack can just do more than a single piece, and you sort of learn that as you play. But you know, that was in the brief. The idea of standing stones that fall over and can't get back up, that's part of just the world design. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes out of those books and comes out of that brief that he gave me that went straight into building that game. So you could still make the argument that it's a story-based game, even though it's a pure abstract. You know, chess is a 99% pure abstract too, but there's still a little bit of story in it.
Okay, cool. I've got 2 TAC-related questions here. One from Brandon Weaver. What are your thoughts on the future of TAC and upcoming TAC tournaments?
I don't have any thoughts on the tournaments except that I'm excited that they're happening. I mean, the TAC organization is independent, and you know, Ben's doing his thing, and we support him in it. But I'm not, you know, making any plans for it. I know we're gonna have a big tournament at Gen Con. That's just gonna be really exciting, and we have a big Cheap Ass has a big booth at Gen Con as well. It's gonna be all TAC all the time, I think. And for the future of the game, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think we're probably gonna see it. New versions, a travel version, I hope, maybe a target version. We may find that it's better to publish with a partner instead of ourselves. Like, I don't want to source stuff out of China. I don't know how. Somebody else probably will. All my stuff is made in the U.S., so that's not scalable beyond a certain point.
Sure.
But from the response that we've gotten so far, I hope that we can turn it into something really big. Like, people are quite fond of it, and we should get the best mileage we can out of that.
Okay, cool. I'm probably going to butcher this name. Motel Zerkind asks, was 3x3 TAC designed as a version of tic-tac-toe without a stalemate?
Not with that goal, but it sort of is. It's sort of like a better version of tic-tac-toe, right? TAC was built on a 5 or a 6 board to start with, and sort of we experimented with different board sizes trying to find the one that was ideal. We never really went down to 3 until we were really pushing the limits, because obviously it's a very small board, but it certainly does play a lot like tic-tac-toe. It just adds another dimension.
Sure. Okay. And Hayden Murray asks, after the success of TAC, do you have any new ideas for abstract games or deluxe of old ones?
I don't know if I'm promoting any of the old abstracts, although I do have a present that I want to build for my 14-year-old self. The first real deliberate game design project that I did was in high school. It's a game called T-Shy, and you can get it on the website now, but it's a game you play with chess pieces. I know it's not technically a chess variant because it's too different from chess, but you play with a chess set, and I wrote it to be sort of the backbone of a fantasy book that I was writing in high school. I didn't finish the book, but I rigorously playtested the game and wrote its history and variants and designed the pieces and all this. So now that I have a wood shop, thanks to TAC, I'm gonna spend some time this summer making a T-Shy set for my house, because my 14-year-old self deserves that.
There you go. That's cool.
But as far as plans for new abstracts, what I'm really planning on doing is coordinating with authors. Like, we were talking about this game I'm doing with Sonia Liris, to do games that belong in their worlds. And the one I'm doing with Sonia isn't a abstract, it's a gambling game. So it's quite luck driven. It's highly volatile. It has some interesting decisions, but in the short term, I don't think that they're going to help you that much. It's sort of like, if you're a gambler at all, this is sort of like somewhere between poker and Pai Gow poker. It's like, I can sit and play this for a long time and not lose or win a lot of money and have a lot of fun and drink a lot of free drinks. But this is designed to be part of a universe where the main character has the uncanny ability to see slightly into the future. And of course, there's a scene in a casino, and she wanted some good solid game to put in there, and I wound up giving her 3. and we're working on that scene right now. And Rochi is going to go into open beta within the next couple of weeks. I have a deck on order just to make sure that it prints right, and then I need to take the weekend to like write up the rules, and then we can all play Rochi.
Cool. All right. Coming to a convention near you.
I think so. I played it this weekend. I was at OrcaCon this weekend and got to play it a little bit and show it to some new folks, and they mostly enjoyed it. There's a few gamers who want more to hold on to while the roller coaster is going, but most people are cool with it. And yeah, we want to see beta feedback. We have a publishing partner who's interested in picking it up and possibly kicking it in April and possibly getting it out by Gen Con. So, fingers crossed for that. We'll try to tell you more as we can.
Nice. All right. We'll make sure we leave a spot for you on the schedule for that.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to run their campaign at the same time that I run my campaign for Buttonman. So, you can have me on and talk about both.
There you go.
In April.
All right. We'll do a little double dipping.
Yeah.
Are you very active on the convention circuit? We met at RinCon, I guess, last October, I guess it was. Yeah. Andy Looney introduced us briefly, and it was a pleasure to meet you then, and it's great to have you on now.
Yeah, I just looked at my schedule for this year, and I'm going to 1 million conventions. I go to 1 or 2 every month. I'm next going to, well, let's see, the next convention that I go to, I just went to OrcaCon, which is a Seattle con, yesterday. Tested my new game a lot that week. The next one I know I'm going to, well, I'm going on the Jonathan Coulton cruise, which I guess a lot of people probably are not. I'm going to the Gamma Trade Show, which is a industry trade show in the middle of March. And I think the first major gaming convention I go to is GameStorm in Portland, which is, I think, towards the end of March. But rolling up from that, I do KublaCon in San Francisco, Origins, Gen Con. My wife does San Diego Comic-Con. I do a couple of gambling trade shows in the fall. I don't know about RinCon yet. I often do RinCon, but sometimes it conflicts. And then, of course, there's PAX in the summer. Just con after con. It's crazy.
Well, it keeps you busy, that's for sure.
Well, and it also gives me lots of new players. I mean, that's part of why I love going to these things. I like to talk about games, I like to meet people, but I've got a bag of stuff that needs testing and it needs new eyes. So that's why I went to OrcaCon this weekend, was just I have a game that needs final testing, and the publisher came back to me with feedback, and they're like, this is broken and this isn't working. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see about that. And I got to fix it, and I got to fix it fast. So convention's the only place to do that.
Right. Do you prefer a smaller venue like RinCon over Gen Con, or, it doesn't?
Well,
whatever?
If I'm testing, it doesn't matter. Like, if I can get a game, it doesn't matter how big the show is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I started going to this really small convention in California. It's defunct now, but I went to it for many years, and it was all in one room. It was all in one pretty small room, but it was a great con because you could always find a pickup game. You could always play what you wanted to play. And so, yeah, Gen Con has spectacle and famous people and giant X-Wings, but if you want to play games, it has a lot more to do with how well the con is run than how big the hotel is.
Sure. Okay. Would you consider supporting a demo team to get people out there showing off all these awesome products from Cheap Ass Games? Do you?
We do. We have an official demo monkey program. You can join it. It's got a newsletter, and there's information about it at the website. So just go to cheapass.com and find out all about it.
Okay, I feel bad now because I missed that and I would not have asked that question.
No, that's fine. Now people ought to know about it. We had a great demo team, 15 years ago, but when I went on hiatus, it all just sort of fell apart. And now we're trying to spin it up again. Obviously, we want people out there, either you want to join the USTA, the TAC Association, and just be a TAC guy and work for them, which is great. You want to play all the cheap ass games, work for us and help us demo stuff. Games don't sell without demos, so we definitely need that help.
Sure. Okay, cool. And then you also have a smaller imprint, Hip Pocket Games. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yeah, we used the Hip Pocket imprint first when we had little $3 games in Ziploc bags. And we brought it back again for pairs because we wanted to get pairs into places that wouldn't necessarily carry cheap-ass games. We did sort of a similar thing with TAC. TAC says James Ernest games on it. It doesn't say cheap-ass games on it. But I just like the Hip Pocket brand for our $10 card games because that's what they are. They're portable and they're cool.
Okay, cool. Like I said before, I love Love a portable, quick filler game. I don't know what that says about me as a gamer, but that's right in my wheelhouse.
Well, here's why I love them. I play games to make decisions, and so I can do that in a 5-minute game. I can do that in a 2-hour game, but I'd rather do it in a 5-minute game. Like, I know that there are things, there are stories, and there are complexities, and there are details that a 5-minute game can't deliver. But if I just want to be challenged and make a decision and see if I was right, I like the portability too. I like the quick play. I like the set it up and break it down, because that means there's more opportunity to play it. You
Sure.
don't have to convince a bunch of other people to commit to a 2-hour session.
Okay, and as we're starting to wrap things up here, how much time do you get to actually spend designing games now?
Not as much as I would like, but I keep trying. My game design challenges go all the way from, you know, product design and sort of high level describe the product, all the way down to editing the rule book. So if you count all of that, then that's my job. If you count just the sort of part that everyone wants to do, then not very much.
Right. That's the thing when you're working for yourself, you wear all the hats.
Well, the other thing is, though, that I'm editing cards during layout. I'm changing game design ideas during production sometimes, and that's hard for a multi-man shop to do. Like a one-man shop a one-person shop can have that sort of connectivity, but if there was a layout guy who was laying out my rules, he wouldn't be questioning the validity of rules while he was laying them out. He would just be making sure they fit on the page. So I'm kind of used to that, and it's sometimes a little frustrating when I'm working with a publisher that I have to get them something that's finished but not finished. I feel like I have to lay it out, you know, because I got to do all the work that gets it done to hand it to them to throw that away and do it all over again.
Sure. All right. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to break into the board game industry?
I don't think I have any. You have to really want it, but break into the board game industry how? As a what? As a designer? As a publisher? As a
designer,
producer?
probably. Yeah.
I think that you should understand that it's a difficult job. I like that the way you do it well is to make it look easy. Like, so learn what you can about the ins and outs of the business from top to bottom. I think most designers would say if you want to be a good designer, you should play a lot of games, but I don't say that at all. I think playing games for research is fine, but if you want to be a good designer, you should design a lot of games and get the discipline to finish them and ship them, even if it just means playing them with your friends. You don't have to publish them, but you have to get them to a state that they are done. And you have to do that a lot of times before you really get what you're doing. Now, if you work in other parts of the business, if you work in production like I have, if you work in editing or writing or any of the other sort of, you know, marketing aspects of the game, it will make you a better game designer too. So develop your understanding of the whole process, and, you know, meet people who are in the business because they know more about it than I do.
Sure, and that's one of those things. If you come in, you know, as intern or helper here or there, you're kind of around, and, you know, as things sort of make their way around. If you're out at the con helping set up the table, maybe, you know, next year it's like, hey, you did that before. Why don't you help me with this thing over here? And kind of a slow, gradual process.
Yep.
All right. So those are all the official questions that I have, but we do have a thing here at the end called the Final Five, which I'd like to ask you. It's 5 geeky/nerdy questions. They're kind of a binary yes or no sort of thing, but you can expound on your answers as much as you like. So
I'm ready.
I'll hit you with the first one. It's Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, God. I think it has to be Star Wars. I love them both. It has to be Star Wars, though.
Okay. What are you thinking about the new movies? The good, bad, indifferent?
I'm liking them. I mean, I respect the criticisms of the new movies, but I'm enjoying them, and they're Star Wars movies. And I think if you looked with the degree of pickiness at the ones that we now revere, you would find them to be even worse. You know what I mean? Like we've made fun of the original Star Wars movies for our whole lives, but because we love them like our family, like we are also attached to them in the ways that we're not to the new ones. I think if you look at them in a vacuum, I did see a review of Rogue One. Spoiler alert: things that happened at the end of Rogue One. That was like, okay, if this was a war movie, and a character who was really, really bad, like let's say it's a Let's Assassinate Hitler movie, and at the very end, Goebbels just showed up and killed a bunch of guys for no apparent reason, and then the audience went wild. That would make no sense at all. But we have this Darth Vader worship, and we're like, "Yeah, Darth Vader!" Woohoo! Like, this movie can't exist in a vacuum. But okay, if it tried, that's what it would be like.
Right, right. Force Awakens, I enjoyed quite a bit. Got in all the feels and all that. Rogue One, I had high expectations for. Like, I was super stoked to go see it, and I left, and it left me flat. Like, I went with my dad, and he super enjoyed it, and I was like, eh.
I like Star Wars for the world. Like, I like the promise of the world that everyone speaks their own language but understands everybody, and that's not always true. But like, that was what I saw in that world. And so any movie that gives me more of that and is pretty to look at and has a couple of good jokes in it, I love. And if I walk away from Rogue One going, wait a minute, maybe we're the Empire, like that's good too. But I don't expect it to be Ex Machina. I don't expect it to be an amazing story in a science fiction setting. I expect it to be a freaking Star Wars movie. So it was great, and I want more. If you walked out of Rogue One wanting more Star Wars movies, then it worked.
There you go. There you go. All right. This one may be a no-brainer, but tabletop or video games?
Tabletop all the way, baby. I haven't bought a new console in forever. I used to do it for my job. Now I don't. I don't get it. I don't like it. It's a big money business with players I don't understand, and tabletop is just where my heart is. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I think that speaks to the social aspect of it too. The social aspect of most video games, like if you're playing The Division or something like that, is just yelling about the guy's mom or where they came from or whatever.
Right.
So it's not quite the same thing.
You don't treat strangers with the same respect as even people in the same room who you don't know. You know what I mean? Like, the internet is such an isolationist thing that it gave us the current political situation we have, and it's never fun for me to play games with those in that environment.
Yeah.
So yeah. I tried to convince my boss's boss at Microsoft when they were interviewing me there that computer games were essentially solitaire games, even in the modern context.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, what about co-op, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, right, but you don't treat those people like people. You treat them like parts of a machine. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different experience than tabletop.
Yeah. See, I get away with that with my brother. Like when we're playing BattleTech, we can say whatever to each other because it's my brother. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. But you go questing with your family or whatever, that's fine. But when you're just logging in to shoot people in Halo, it's not they're not people. Yeah. I mean, they are, but you don't treat them like they are.
Right. The wonders of the internet, right?
Yeah.
DC or Marvel?
I know a lot more about Marvel because I worked on a Marvel game. But that's a really tough call. I'm going to have to go with DC for the comics, Marvel for the movies.
Or Batman for the comics and Marvel for the movies.
That's what I just said.
So I should just take DC out and just put Batman.
Well, this is what frustrated me about Batman v Superman, and it was a terrible movie in all kinds of reasons, including that it felt like there was a great Wonder Woman movie happening in the next room that I didn't get to see. But the thing that bothered me about it was remembering Dark Knight when Superman and Batman fought for a reason. Like, yeah, that was a good story. This was just garbage, and that comes from me reading Dark Knight. Maybe if I hadn't, if I didn't know the material, maybe I would feel better about it. But yeah, no.
Sure. All right, we're gonna extend this into a 6th question. So from Charles in charge, Cthulhu or Dagon?
Or who?
Dagon.
I think that's my answer.
No. Okay, so we're a little too far afield. Then we're H.P. Lovecraft territory now.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. All right, so back to the other questions. Sci-fi or fantasy?
I think fantasy. I mean, that's where I spend most of my time. The problem with space, and this is from a marketer's perspective, the problem with space is there's nothing there. So if you try to make something about ships in space, it's going to feel like every other ship in space thing you've ever done, unless you color it up with something else that's familiar. Okay. But fantasy is, I mean, it's overdone, but the reason it's overdone is it's full of understandable archetypes of every conceivable size and shape.
Sure. Okay. And if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Blindness. because then I could live without fear.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. Never had that before. I would have thought maybe flying.
My daughter watched Deadpool with me back. I don't know, when she was probably 7, and the whole movie she was like, "That's your thing. You can't see. That's your whole power. You're blind. Okay, I guess." Not Deadpool. What did I didn't say Deadpool. I meant
Daredevil.
Daredevil. Yeah, Daredevil. Deadpool is great. Daredevil.
Yeah, you can't make an R-rated superhero movie.
Oh, you can't get away with that. That would never work.
Well, Brian saw that with the little video clips and the released footage and the all that other stuff. I mean, he really fought the good fight for that. So he did a good job. But
yeah, that was a fun movie.
Yeah. All right. If you want to give all of your contact information, of course, we'll have links and stuff in the show notes because I forgot to do it earlier. So I will do it when this wraps up. So if you want to give all that stuff out.
Well, I'm James Ernest of Cheap Ass Games, and you can find me on Twitter. Our company is at Cheap Ass Games. I'm personally at Cheap Ass James. And we have a Facebook page that I believe is called Actual Cheap Ass Games because, of course, we got spoofed before we were on there. But we're the one that seems current is the right one. Cheapass.com is the nexus point for all this stuff. We have a newsletter you can subscribe to right there and learn all about what's new every couple of weeks.
Cool. They can get on there, join the demo team, and maybe get out there and promote the cheap ass world. People are interested in that.
Share the joy of learning. I'm glad you enjoy Pairs. That's such a good, solid game.
Yeah, it was really fun because it has such a poker aspect. I brought it to the meetup, and I explained it and was okay. Well, let's see if we could figure it out. And I just started dealing out cards, and people are tapping the table, they're giving the nod, they're a thumbs up or whatever. It's just a really cool thing. And some of the colors are really close, so you start to flip it and like, oh, but it's not that color, and you're like, oh, okay. And then everybody's like, whoa. It's a lot of fun, and it would be even better as a drinking game, which I haven't done. But I think if you're at home,
absolutely. I mean, it's a game with one loser. It belongs in a bar, right? I mean, this is a game where you have to pay a penalty. And I played this on the Joko Cruise a couple years ago. I taught it on the Joko Cruise a couple years ago, and I heard of other groups who were exacting some really brilliant penalties, like if you lose, you have to do a lap around the deck. My favorite ones were dinner related. If you've ever eaten on a cruise ship, you know what that's like. And one person had to accept bread whenever it was offered, and that didn't just include the waitstaff. Anybody at the table could offer him bread, and he had to say yes, thank you. So yeah, that's the penalties are a good unsung part of that game.
Yeah, for sure. Which we have to be a little bit more light at the board game meetups. It's just like, oh well, you lost. we get a large variety in age.
Make him tell a joke. It's a great penalty.
There you go. I'll have to try that next time. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. This was a pleasure. I'm glad that we were able to finally put this together. I know we didn't get a chance to talk at RenCon too much, but this was definitely a lot of fun for me, and I hope so for you as well.
Absolutely, and I hope I'll see you there again next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm planning on going. That was my first RenCon, and what a way to kick it off. I met you to schedule this and, talk to Andy Looney and got an interview from him and, talked to Seth Jaffe. And it was just a wonderful experience. It's such a small con. You see the same people all weekend and, you can really sort of get into the nuts and bolts of certain things. And it was a lot of fun. I prefer those smaller cons.
Yeah, it's a good show.
Absolutely. I'll give out our details here real quick. You can find this awesome content and all of our other stuff at legendsoftabletop.com. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can reach out to us at legendsoftabletop@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at legendstabletop, no of. We're on Instagram and Tumblr and YouTube, where some of you are watching this now. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who participated tonight in the live chat and sent us questions and things by Twitter. We appreciate that. And we like to see people being involved. It gives us all the warm fuzzies, so that's good for us. We're also on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can find all of these video podcasts released as MP3s. So we hope you download all those things. And thanks again to James for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
we will be in touch to get you scheduled for sometime in April, and we look forward to that as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, everybody, for checking it out, and we'll catch you next time.